In this module, we're going to be adding data and forms to our process. In order to persist data in BizFlow, there's different ways that you can do that. And in our little example here, we're going to be taking a time off form that you can see here. It's a very simple form. And we're going to be linking it to the activities in the process so that when we initiate the process and the work item is presented to the user, there's a form for them to complete. And we need to put this data somewhere. We need to persist it or save it somewhere. And there's different ways to do that. One of the techniques that you can use is process variables. And you can save those variables or define them on the process and then store the form data in those variables. You could also link the form fields to your own database tables that you define. For this particular exercise, we're going to use process variables to persist the form data. So going back to the Process Studio, if you disconnected and you're starting this module at another time, you can open the Process Studio and connect again using your login ID and password. And again, we're going to navigate to our project and navigate to our process, and we're going to double click and open that process. And by doing that, we're going to check the process out. And now that we have the process checked out, we want to add first this variable data that I've been talking about. And in order to do that, if we right click anywhere on the process and we select process variables, that's one way we can navigate to the process variable attributes. I can go to the File menu and select Process Properties and then Process Variables. And these are just different ways to navigate the various characteristics of BizFlow. Here we have our process instance variables, and I'm not going to describe the global and definition level variables at this time, but the instance variables are going to store information for each individual instance. So for each case or for each time we run this process, we're going to store variables specific to this particular case or this request. In this case, a time off request. I'm going to now add a number of process variables to this process. Once I've defined the variables, I can then also specify the type. And my name is going to be strings. My time off type is going to be a pull down, so it's also a string. And then of course my dates I want to set to the type, set the type as date. Now that I have my variables defined, now I want to link my form to the process. And we've pre-built a form for you to use as part of your exercises in this online course. So we're not going to be creating a form in this particular course. In the training examples folder, you're going to find a time off form. Now, just so that you can see what this looks like, what we do in BizFlow is we register a form or an application with BizFlow. So this form was created using the BizFlow WebMaker form tool. And once that form is created, we do a new application and we register that WebMaker form. So, we would have said time off 1, and we would have said it was a WebMaker form. And of course, it's not going to let me do that because it's not unique. But it would then register that form with this project and with the server. So the form gets created, then we register it with the project and into the applications folder, and then we can then link it. Now we can go ahead and view this form. If I were to do view, I could actually take this URL and paste this into a browser, and I can see what this form looks like. So you can see we have a really simple form. It has the request date, employee first and last name, the start and end dates, and time off. And what does that look like? It looks familiar, right? We just defined the same data on the process definition so that when the person fills out this form, there's a place to store that data and persist it from one step in the flow to another. So when the person completes the first step and fills out that form, it's going to store that data with the process. And when the person opens the second step in the process, it's going to load that form from the variable data that's now stored on this process or with this process. So what we're going to do is we're going to link this time off form to the first step in the activity by dragging and dropping it and linking it. And now when we double click and we look at the application tab, we see that it's now linked to this step in the flow. And I'm going to do that same thing again to this step in the process. The other thing that you'll know now is that forms can be reused across projects. So this could have been, and it was, a project done by someone else, and forms created in another project that I'm using in my project. So you can share resources across projects as might make sense. You can also copy and paste resources between projects. So if I wanted to make a copy of this process and I wanted to use it in another project, I could simply right-click copy and then paste it into another project. So now that I have my forms linked to my activities and I have my variable data defined on the process, I'm just going to do a quick verification. And what the verification does is it makes sure that everything in the process is right before I attempt to publish it. If there was something wrong, BIS was not going to allow me to publish the process. And this is how I would determine what the problem was. So let's go ahead and create a problem. If I were to, for example, remove the participant from this activity, so we don't have any participant assigned, we instantly get a question mark. And what's more is in our verification, it says that the activity level verification shows that this activity has no participant. So it's going to tell you the issues that you have with the process, and you'll need to remedy those before you can publish it. So we know our process is going to publish without any trouble, and we can go ahead and check the process back in. And I'm not going to check it out again. And now I'm going to go through those same publication steps again. I'm going to right click on my project and I'm going to select publish. I'm going to select my process and push it over. And now what you notice is not only do I have my process, but I have the linked application. So it's smart enough to know that these two items have a dependency on each other, and it moves the relationship of that application over as well. And then I have my destination folder, which has already been defined, so I need not do anything there again, and I simply click finish. And now once again I can disconnect from the Process Studio and I can log into the client and go to the Start New menu again to see the list of processes we can start, and click on or start my first process. And now when the first activity launches, you should see the form linked to this screen. And you can see that these are not only the form fields, but also the process variables that we defined on the process. And you can fill out the fields. And when you're ready, you can complete and submit the process. Click complete and then click send. Now once again, we can go to the My Work tab and we'll see the Manager Approves request in the work list, and we can open that up and we'll see the data from the previous step in the process. If your data didn't save, if you're having any issues with the persistence of the variables, then what you can do is you can take a look at your process definition and remember to make sure that the process variables were named exactly the way that I showed you here on the screen, and be sure that in fact that they were strings and dates. If there's any inconsistency or if they're not exactly the same, then the system will fail potentially to persist the data. And again, now you can see the approve and disapprove from the response option that you created, and you can complete the item.